Hello and welcome to Doubles and Trebles. We're back with our weekly Premier League darts preview and review. We're looking at night 12 shortly, Pineman, which is going to Dublin. But firstly, as always, we're going to have a quick look back at week 11. And there is only one place to start. Matt Pineman Hill put up a 6-1 winner. He said Clayton and Van Gerwen were going to be in the final. They did make the final, and it was plain sailing from there, Pineman. You didn't care who won the final because you was already in front with a 6-1 winner. As it turned out, it was a cracking final. Both Clayton and Van Gerwen both averaging over 102. Went to a deciding leg. It had all sorts. It continued even after the last dart was thrown. I really enjoyed it. What did you make of week 11, Pineman?
Yeah, thanks for that nice intro. It's nice to not be getting panned for my selections. Yeah, it was a good winner, 6-1. Happy with that. The two form players duly delivered. Johnny Clayton had to survive some bumps in the road. He wasn't really at it against Gary Anderson in the first round, but thankfully Anderson was even worse, so he kind of stumbled through and then improved. But he had to improve against Peter Wright in the semi-final, who I thought was actually really good on the night, really solid, better than we've seen him recently. But Clayton just a little bit too good for him, so he was a worthy finalist, and so was Michael Van Gerwen. Gerwin Price was 3-2 up on Van Gerwen on throw, and then Van Gerwen reeled off four legs in really emphatic fashion, and that's what we've been seeing from him in the last few weeks. And then he just had too much for James Wade. James Wade couldn't live with him, frankly, and it was a really interesting final, a worthy final. The two best players in it, and as you say, controversy after the final, which I definitely think is worth discussing for anyone who didn't see it. We had a whistler in the crowd at Aberdeen, and it was I don't know how you found of your viewing experience, Adam, but for me it was even coming through the screen. The individual in question making a short, sharp whistling noise virtually every throw for the last leg. I mean, it's just too much alcohol, and idiots were reigning, unfortunately. And it was such a shame because what a brilliant game of darts it was. We see this more and more at the moment. The crowd sort of having an impact on these big matches. None of us regular darts viewers enjoy watching it. That I'm not really sure what the answer is, but it certainly had an impact on this game because while Johnny Clayton kept his head down and showed fantastic composure to get the game done, Russ Bray was having to intervene in the final leg. He said thank you in order to try and settle the crowd down a couple of times. Didn't really work. He was getting more and more aggressive with his thank you. It was the most aggressive thank you you're likely to hear. But Van Gerwen kind of took liberties with that after the game. He seemed to have about a 2-minute conversation with Russ Bray, seemed to be really visibly annoyed. And I think watching it back, as I have done, it seems that Russ Bray was maybe just moving a little bit when he was going to address this. I mean, the line of sight between this guy making the noise was clearly across the hockey, and Russ Bray was kind of having to move quite significantly to try and settle it down. And it seemed to irk Van Gerwen. In that last leg, Van Gerwen was back on 300.
It was terrible.
When Clayton was on a 2-dart finish, and Van Gerwen had the throw. So it certainly impacted him. But I can't help but feel it was a little bit of frustration bubbling over that he hadn't managed to get the win. He's a fierce competitor, Van Gerwen, and I think we maybe just saw him a little bit heat of the moment. He has since tweeted that it was nothing to do with the crowd, and it was something else that had irked him. So I think it's pretty clear he wasn't happy with the way Russ Bray handled the situation. I have full sympathy with Russ Bray. He was trying to do something to get on top of the crowd, but for me it's a wider issue that the PDC have got to take a look at. I'm all for everyone having a good drink and a good laugh at the darts and the sing song. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the atmosphere is unique, and we should be able to enjoy that. It doesn't affect the players, but this whistling and intentionally trying to put players off with no benefit to the atmosphere, they've got to clamp down on it. Whether it's added security or stopping the game and kicking individuals out, I don't know, but something's got to be done. Anyway, don't let it take away from Van Gerwen and Johnny Clayton, who were both brilliant. And Johnny Clayton had to play the two Scottish players in Scotland in the quarterfinal and semi-final. Did a solid job on them both, especially Peter Wright, who played quite well. And then he was just magnificent against Van Gerwen. Never gave up when he looked beaten, and it's a mark of the man. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, they were top two at the start of the night. They were definitely top two at the end of the night. And the final was actually a mini playoff to see who would be top after week 11. Not that it matters all that much at this stage. But, I mean, I thought it was a brilliant final until that last leg, Pineman. They was just reacting to each other. You punch me, I'll punch you. You hit a 180, I'll hit a 180, I'll react to you. About halfway through Van Gerwen had 94, single 18 and two double 19s. The cameraman could hardly keep up. I love that two double 19s finished.
Yeah, it's got to be one of the best finishes to watch, can't it?
And then MVG's throwing for the match. As you say, Pineman to win. I think it would have been 6-4. Throwing for the match, goes off 180, 140. It does not win the leg. Clayton forces the decider. It's a shame that MVG didn't threaten in the deciding leg, as you've covered. But we don't know what was said between Russ Bray and Van Gerwen. There was a lot said. We don't know what it was. But one thing I will say, Russ Bray not backing down from Van Gerwen, standing there, chest out, responding. Whatever might have been said, we would have quite enjoyed to hear it, to be honest. But yeah,
it might be nice
come out
to have them mic'd up, wouldn't it? Maybe like some of the referees sometimes see in the rugby league and stuff, get them mic'd up.
Yeah, it might have come out in the wash. But other than the final, a familiar theme really, Pineman. The likes of Wade, Clayton, Van Gerwen have been making the latter stages for 5 or 6 weeks now, and obviously that happened again last week. But Smith and Anderson out first round again. I said it last week, but Anderson's gone out 4 times now in the first round. Michael Smith has gone out 5 times. The most recent 5 times on the bounce. So that really is an ongoing theme. Wade and MVG first round wins. Even I can't stop James Wade winning at the moment in the Premier League, because I said last week that I was backing James Wade to win his first round match against Michael Smith. He made hard work of it. He went to a decider. I thought the writing was on the wall for my bet with Wade. But yeah, even I can't stop him. Pineman advised the final. Gary Anderson was pretty rubbish, as we've covered. And like you said, Pineman, the first round game between Price and Van Gerwen was neck and neck until it was about 3-2-ish. And then, as you say, Van Gerwen just hits the afterburners and leaves him in his dust to win 6-3. So other than the final, anything else for you to take away there, Pineman?
No, not really. I think we're starting to see the table shape up now. I talked about maybe looking for an outsider in the outright market. I think that ship has sailed, to be honest. The table was already starting to take some kind of shape, and we've kind of had these 2 or 3 key weeks where these guys towards the bottom, especially Smith and Anderson, they needed to go and win a night if they were going to reignite their campaign. It hasn't happened. I think we have to say that those two are done now, and time is ticking quite swiftly for the others in terms of where they're going to finish. Getting a little bit concerned for those that aren't out there, that are outside the places, but I don't know. As I'm going to come on to later in the night, I've seen signs with Gerwin Price that he might have one last roar in him, and I think that it would be unwise to write him off. But you're looking at the gap now; it's widening by the week, and as you say, this consistency of getting to semi-finals and finals just puts you in a really solid position. And I think we have to say, we're still learning about this format. It's the first time we've seen this format. And one takeaway for me next year is going to be the importance of winning that first match. I think it's so easy to focus on who's won the finals and who's made the finals. But if you're making that semi-final, more often than not, you're going to be in the mix for 4th spot. You don't have to be going and winning it 3, 4, 5 nights. You've just got to be competitive every week. And I think we've seen, Gerwin Price, everybody knows he's capable of winning it on the night, but he has gone out in the first round an awful lot. And that is starting to hurt him now. Now he needs to go and actually win a couple of these last nights to get to that Final Four. Whereas he could have made his life a little bit easier by winning a couple of more quarterfinal matches in previous weeks, ones that he's chucked away and not looked particularly interested when the tide's gone against him. So, it's a long haul and it's suited a grinder like James Wade. And it's a really interesting few weeks coming up.
Yeah, so the table, as you say, is taking shape. We've got the top 2, Clayton and Van Gerwen, 26 and 25 respectively. Then the next 2, Peter Wright and James Wade, locked on 20 each. And then it's everyone else. But actually, of that everyone else category, it looks like Joe Cullen's got the best chance of that lot of making the top 4. He's on 15. He's got work to do. But the likes of Gerwin Price, 11, Michael Smith, 8, and Gary Anderson is now somewhat adrift at the bottom on 7. I've mentioned about the streaks. Anderson and Smith are bang out of form in this format. I've looked, every week, man, at least one of us will mention throwing first, and that's already built into the draw. So the guys that are, the home player, if you like, as they're listed on the likes of PDC, throw first. There's been 75 matches, man. We've missed a couple of matches because Price withdrew and Anderson got COVID. So there's been 75 matches. 39 of them have been won by the man throwing first. That's only 52%. So maybe it's not as an important factor as definitely myself, and I think yourself, thought it may well have been.
Yeah, I'm on the fence with it, to be honest. On the Pro Tour, it never really bothers me if my player is throwing second. But you would think, logically, with the quality of these players, that, especially if you go into a deciding leg, that the throw would be important. But we saw it last week. Johnny Clayton in that last leg against Van Gerwen, it's a perfect example. The quality that these guys have. It seems to be that because they know they need a massive leg when they're against the Dart in that last leg, that they can produce it. So even at 5-5, I'm finding myself not writing off the guy who hasn't got the throw, because they could go 140, 180 or 140, 140, and suddenly it's a coin flip. So yeah, definitely interesting statistics, and one to bear in mind when you're making your rackers, I think.
Right, on to night 12. We're off to Dublin. There's no Irish participants this year, but there'll certainly be some pantomime villains, the usual suspects, I imagine. Wade and Van Gerwen, not both of them will be making the latter stages this week because they play each other in the first round. James Wade is nearly 2-1, just a little bit under, and Michael Van Gerwen is 1-2. Running quickly through the fixtures of the first round: Gerwin Price, Joe Cullen. Gerwin Price 4-7, Cullen 13-8. Then you've got Michael, the battle of the bottom two. One of them's got to win. Michael Smith 4-6 against Gary Anderson 5-4 ish, and then Clayton and Snake, they played each other in the semi-final last week. Clayton's odds on just there at around 4-5, and Peter Wright 6-5. What do you make of the first round action in Dublin this week?
Yeah, James Wade, Michael Van Gerwen's an interesting one, because these two played about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and James Wade wiped the floor with Van Gerwen, and it was very much against the form book there. And since then, we've seen Wade hit this kind of purple patch. So just shows one result can sort of kickstart a campaign. I wouldn't be rushing to back him. At 2-1 is a fair price, for the form he's on. He's shown he can live with all these guys. I could understand why somebody would want to be with James Wade at 2-1. However, I'm just not in a rush to take on Michael Van Gerwen. Even in losing last week, he looked really, really rock solid, and I'd be very surprised if he doesn't grind this game out kind of 6-3-ish. 6-4-ish. I don't think Wade will get steamrolled because his finishing's been superb. So I expect him, any legs that he's on the premises on his own throw, I would expect him to see them out. But just think Van Gerwen just looks relentless at the moment, and it's hard to see him not delivering enough to beat Wade. And yes, Wade had that comprehensive victory over him, but Van Gerwen was really out of sorts that night, and we've not seen him that bad since. So you have to say, on the balance of what we've seen, Van Gerwen should have too much for Wade, but I wouldn't be rushing to have a bet here.
Yeah, and I think the top half of the draw, if you like, this week looks a lot more difficult than the bottom half. Gerwin Price and Joe Cullen. I mean, it's been a while since Joe Cullen's had a significant win in this tournament. But like you say, Gerwin Price might be. He needs a run to the final. They both do. One of them might fancy it this week.
It's a weird one, because these are the two players that I was most interested in. I was disappointed to see that they were playing each other, because I thought Joe Cullen actually played really well in defeat to Peter Wright. Peter Wright was, 6-5, a really good game, went down to the last leg. Peter Wright had the crowd very much with him. Cullen was giving the crowd a little bit as well, silencing the Scottish crowd, which I thought at the time was unwise. But to be fair to him, his standard didn't drop at all. He was really, really good, and just came out on the wrong side of a good game. So I was encouraged by that. It was the best we'd seen from him in a few weeks. And same for Gerwin Price, to be honest. I mean, he should have really gone 4-2 up on Van Gerwen. He loses the leg and then gets broken in the next leg. And from there, he kind of tailed off. I've seen that a little bit too much in recent weeks. Gerwin Price, talk about him losing these quarterfinal games. And I just kind of feel like he's very quick to accept defeat, whereas in a normal tournament, you would not see him accept defeat. I think he maybe thinks with these short formats that, oh, well, there's always got next week. Well, it's getting to the point where he hasn't always got next week now. Realistically, he's going to have to go and win 2 of these nights or make the final in 3 of them. And he's got to cut out these first round losses if he's going to have any chance of making finals night. I expect a reaction from him. We saw him post on social media saying that he will make finals night a week or so ago. And then, as I say, you come up against Michael Van Gerwen. Not a lot you could do about that if Van Gerwen fancies it at the moment. But I do think that Price, if he really fancies it, as he seems to, he could have too much for Cullen here. He's a tad short on the match betting, but it's a funny one. If he gets through this, I could actually see him beating Van Gerwen, and that's a game where he would be an outsider. So while I wouldn't advise a bet in either of those 2 quarterfinals, if it is Price and Van Gerwen in the semi, I'd be interested in taking on Price, just from the mental setup and the likely makeup of the market.
Yep. The bottom of the league clash: Michael Smith versus Gary Anderson. I don't like to criticise Michael Smith, and I shouldn't have that feeling about anyone or anything, because I just call it as it is with most things. But it does seem to be a bit popular to criticise Michael Smith. We all know the backstory there. But I thought it was absolutely awful last week, Piman. I thought it was terrible. He's talking to himself, shaking his head. Doubles was terrible. He wasn't even scoring that well, which usually keeps him in games. I thought it was awful. So as a result, this week I will be backing Gary Anderson at 5-4, even though on the averages last week, Gary Anderson wasn't that much better than Michael Smith. He was actually, in fact, worse on the averages. But I'm going to be with Gary Anderson in that 5-4.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I think I would probably be with him at 5-4 as well. I mean, I'm reluctant to get with either of these two with any degree of certainty. But yeah, Smith is a victim of this format. I've said it a few times on this video that when you're not playing well in the Premier League, it's relentless. You're playing the best players week in, week out, and once you know your chances of qualification have gone, you just want it to finish. We've heard players in the past, that I'm thinking of Gerwin Price, Kim Hybrex, and even going right back to the start of the Premier League, a lot of these lads that were finishing bottom all the time, and when they know they're not going to qualify, they just look like they don't want to be there. There is good money to be made in this competition, but all of these 8 players have come to the tournament thinking they can win it. So once you know that you're not qualifying, it's tough. I don't expect this to be a high quality affair, but Gary Anderson's average is probably slightly ill-reflected by a slow start where he missed a load of darts at double. He should have been a couple of legs ahead of Johnny Clayton early on. A couple of legs where he was way ahead in the scoring and couldn't put it to bed. Clayton sort of warmed up as the game went on. And then by the time that Clayton was playing well, Anderson was playing a lot better, but the ship had sailed by then. I could see this being nip and tuck, and I think you've got to be with Anderson at 5-4 just because you can't have any confidence in Michael Smith, the where he's at mentally with this tournament. So, yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, like it. And I think I know it's quite obvious, but I think Clayton or Snakebite, whoever wins that game between them pair, is going to go on to make the final. And at the prices to win the evening, which is your speciality, Pine Man, Johnny Clayton 7-2 to win the evening, and Peter Wright's 9-2. Just basically going off those prices, I would rather be with Peter Wright. It's not often you'll hear those words come out of my mouth, but at 9-2, I think and the biggest if would be the first round game against Clayton, you'd fancy whoever wins this quarterfinal to win the semi and on to the final they go.
Yeah, I could see the argument for that. Definitely, Peter Wright, as I say, was someone on my radar. I liked what I saw from him last week. The doubles weren't going in, but he didn't beat himself up. He just kept going, and that was an off night on doubling for Peter Wright. Normally, he's a very reliable finisher, but the other elements of his game were there. The scoring was back. Haven't seen that for a while, and that's a really encouraging sign for me with Peter Wright. When that scoring's starting to come back, he could be on the cusp of going on a little run of quality, that the kind of quality that's seen him become a world champion and become a multiple major winner. So, yeah, definitely positive signs. And Johnny Clayton, it's so hard to fault him. And I love him. I absolutely adore him. So I don't want to knock him. But is it sustainable to go every single week and do what he's doing? It may be. We saw him. He was a bit slow at the blocks in this Premier League. He looks really in his groove now. But to be honest, he doesn't necessarily need to have an off night to get beaten off Peter Wright here. This could be a nip and tuck game. And yeah, Peter Wright, he didn't have the rub of the green in the semi-final last week. If he does, yeah, I would fancy him to go on and win the night myself quite strongly. And yeah, I'll come on to it, but I'll go for a little bit of an outsider in the predict the finalist market this week.
Right, well, I'm Snake and Anderson, so you tell me who's going to make the final, Pie Man, and eventually who will win it.
I'm going to go for Peter Wright going